Next item of business is debate on motion 4710 in the name of Nicola Sturgeon on Scotland's choice. I would invite any member who wishes to speak in this debate to press their request to speak buttons now, and I call on Nicola Sturgeon to speak to and move the motion.
Presiding Officer, the decision to seek Parliament's authority to begin the process towards an independence referendum is not one that I have reached lightly. It is therefore important to set out why we have arrived at this point, and also, in light of the significant change facing our country, to reflect on the importance of giving the people of Scotland a democratic choice over our future. As a result of the Brexit vote, we know that change is now inevitable. The question is, what kind of change is right for Scotland, and should that be decided for us or by us? In the past 2 years or so, the Scottish Government has made a number of proposals designed to protect Scotland from the impact of Brexit. It's important to note that had any one of these proposals been accepted by the UK Government, we would not be having this debate today. We recognised early on the risks to Scotland from the EU referendum, and so before the referendum even took place, we proposed that Brexit should be possible only if all 4 UK nations voted to leave. That sort of provision, relatively common in federal countries such as Australia and Canada, would in this context have recognised the reality of the UK as a multinational, not a unitary state. That proposal was rejected. As a result, although... yes.
Would the First Minister recognise that the country is entirely divided down the middle, and that it is the job of the First Minister, surely, to heal those divisions rather than make them worse?
First Minister.
Well, I believe very strongly that where there is a difference of opinion about the best way forward, the best thing to do is to allow people to choose the best way forward. As a result of that proposal being rejected, although Scotland voted by 62% to 38% to stay within the European Union, we now face being taken out of the EU against our will, with massive implications for our economy, our society and our place in the world. Contrary to the promises made by the No campaign before the 2014 independence referendum, staying in the UK has not safeguarded Scotland's relationship with Europe, it has jeopardised it. Before last year's elections to this Parliament, the SNP's manifesto took account of that possibility. It said this: the Scottish Parliament should have the right to hold another referendum if there is a significant and material change in the circumstances that prevailed in 2014, such as Scotland being taken out of the EU against our will. It is worth being clear. That manifesto commitment, combined with the result of the Scottish election, which returned a pro-independence majority to this Parliament, and then the outcome of the EU referendum, gives the Scottish Government an unquestionable democratic mandate for an independence referendum. And there is, and let me make some progress, I'll take an intervention shortly, there is an important point here for those who seek to question that mandate. To suggest that an emphatic election victory, on the basis of a clear manifesto commitment and a parliamentary majority on an issue, does not provide a mandate, begs the question, what does? And it runs the real risk of undermining the democratic process. Yes.
Lewis MacDonald.
I'm grateful to the First Minister, and I know that she will acknowledge that at that election she lost her overall parliamentary majority. It's an important point if we're talking about mandates to make that point. Can she tell us what assessment she has made of the view of the Scottish people and the appetite of the Scottish people for the kind of referendum that she proposed last Monday?
First Minister.
We won the election on the basis of that proposition, and of course the vote that will take place in this Parliament tomorrow evening will demonstrate very clearly whether or not there is a majority in this Parliament for that proposition. Notwithstanding the mandate that we have, I want to make some progress. Notwithstanding the clear mandate that we have, however, the Scottish Government did not seek a referendum on independence immediately after the EU vote. Instead, we tried to find common ground with the UK Government. I'm going to make some progress. We tried to... OK, I'll take an intervention.
Ruth Davison.
On the point that the First Minister raises, can I ask her, were my ears deceiving me when I heard her within 3 hours of that vote being announced on the Friday morning, saying that she had already instructed civil servants and officials of the Scottish Government to draw up the necessary legislation for a second independence referendum.
First Minister.
Well, I know that Ruth Davidson has a selective memory. She has, of course, forgotten that she said, following the referendum, that we should seek to stay in the single market. But if Ruth Davidson had listened carefully, what she would have also heard me say that day was that I was determined to explore alternative options to independence. What I sought to do was to find a way of allowing Scotland to stay in the UK while also protecting the most vital elements of our relationship with Europe. In other words, we tried to square the UK-wide vote to leave the EU with the Scottish vote to remain, and to give effect to how people in Scotland voted in both 2014 and 2016. We were encouraged in our endeavours by the initial comments of the Prime Minister, who made a commitment last July to seek agreement with the devolved administrations before triggering Article 50. So in the compromise paper we published in December, we argued firstly that the UK as a whole should stay inside the single market. That seemed the obvious consensus position in a state where 48% of voters and 2 out of 4 nations voted to stay in the EU. That would also have been in line with the clear commitment in the Conservatives' own manifesto. Not right now, I'm going to make some progress. Yet, despite this, the Prime Minister ruled out single market membership without any prior consultation with the devolved administrations, and that in itself was a breach of the commitment she made in July. However, the Scottish Government also proposed ways in which, with political will, the option of Scotland staying in the single market, even if the rest of the UK chose to leave, might be achieved. We also proposed significant new powers for this Parliament, short of independence, that would help protect Scotland's interests in the post-Brexit landscape. Powers that would effectively have delivered the federal solution that some in this chamber say they favour. However, all of these efforts at compromise, each and every one, have been rejected. Indeed, there has been no meaningful attempt whatsoever by the UK Government to explore these options and find common ground. Which brings me to where we are today. Having voted to remain in the EU, we face now being taken out against our will. And the probability is that our exit, taking us outside the single market, will be on harder and harsher terms than most people, including many Leave voters, would have supported in the run-up to last June's referendum. The voice of this Parliament has been ignored at every step of the way, and far from any indication of new powers, we now face the prospect of the UK Government using Brexit to reserve for itself powers in areas that are currently devolved to this Parliament. Now, all of this raises fundamental questions for Scotland. If the UK Government can ignore this Parliament on one of the most fundamental issues that the country faces, what meaning can ever be attached to the idea that the UK is a partnership of equals? If the UK refuses to guarantee the rights of EU citizens and focuses on ending free movement, despite the fact that growing our population is economically essential for Scotland, what does that mean for Scotland's desire to be an open, inclusive, welcoming society? And if the UK Government is determined to leave the single market, despite the wealth of evidence that doing so could permanently weaken our economy, risking jobs, investment and trade, what does that mean for our living standards and our future prosperity? And add to all of that the fact that because of the collapse of the Labour Party, the current UK Government could now be in power until 2030 or beyond. Indeed. And it becomes clear that Scotland faces a fundamental question. It is a question not just of how we respond to Brexit, but about what sort of country we want Scotland to be. The answer to that question is surely one that should lie in our own hands. And that is the fundamental point at the heart of today's debate. As a country, we cannot avoid change, but we can choose what kind of change we want. Now, let me say quite clearly that I understand why many people do not relish the prospect of another referendum on a major issue within the space of a few years. That is something that weighs heavily on me, as I'm sure it does with others. However, The alternative to planning now to give Scotland a choice is this. It is simply to drift through the next 2 years, crossing our fingers, hoping for the best while fearing the worst, knowing that no matter how hard we work to avoid it, we may well have to accept a hard Brexit, come what may, no matter how damaging that turns out to be. It would mean accepting now that at the end of this process, we will not even have the option of choosing an alternative path, that the direction of our nation will be decided for us. I do not consider that to be right or fair. The future of Scotland should not be imposed upon us. It should be the choice of the people of Scotland. I've taken an intervention from you. I'll take one from Willie Rennie.
Ruth Davidson first.
The First Minister talks about the will...
Willie Rennie.
Oh, sorry.
Willie Rennie.
I don't know if that indicates any preference. Alex Salmond, the First Minister's Foreign Affairs spokesman, said this morning that an independent Scotland would only seek membership of EFTA, not full membership of the European Union. How can the First Minister claim a mandate using the EU if she cannot even guarantee or even seek membership, full membership of the European Union?
First Minister.
The SNP's position in favour of membership of the EU is clear and it is long-standing. And what is beyond any doubt is that if we do not become independent, then that membership of the EU is ended because we are taken out against our will. I want to know I'm going to make some progress. I want to turn now, Presiding Officer, to the question of the timing of a referendum. As a matter of principle, the timing, together with decisions on franchise and subject to the advice of the Electoral Commission, the question should be for this Parliament to decide, just as it was in 2014. But that decision should be taken in the interests of the Scottish people having an informed choice, not driven by a consideration of what is convenient for any politician or party. The Prime Minister has said that now is not the time, and I agree with that. The choice must be informed. That means it should not happen before the terms of Brexit are known. In the speech she gave at Lancaster House in January, the Prime Minister said this, and I quote, "I want us to have reached an agreement on our future partnership by the time the 2-year Article 50 process has concluded." If the Prime Minister is to deliver on that commitment, the terms of that agreement will require to be clear around 6 months in advance, autumn next year, to allow for the process of EU ratification. The European Commission has itself said that there will only be 18 months for negotiation. That has led to my view that the earliest time at which Scotland could make an informed choice would be the autumn of next year. However, it is also important that the choice is made while it is still possible in a timely manner to choose a different path. Therefore, it is also my judgment that the latest date for that choice, I'm going to make progress, I've taken lots of interventions, I'm going to make some progress. The latest date for that choice to be made should be around the time that the UK leaves the EU in the spring of 2019. That is the timeframe that I am asking Parliament to endorse today. But let me make this clear, Presiding Officer. If the UK Government disagrees with that timeframe, then they should set out a clear alternative and the rationale for it. And as I have said in recent days, I am, within reason, happy to have that discussion to see if we can find common ground that I can then propose to this Parliament. However, it will simply not be acceptable for the UK Government to stand as a roadblock to the democratically expressed will of this Parliament. It is, of course, entirely legitimate for the UK Government and for other parties in this chamber to robustly oppose independence. That is an honourable position, albeit one that I disagree with. However, in the circumstances we now face, for the UK Government to stand in the way of Scotland, even having a choice, would be, in my view, wrong, unfair and utterly unsustainable. Presiding Officer, no, I'm going to make some progress. Let me now turn to the nature of that choice. I have already acknowledged that it must be an informed choice. That means that the people of Scotland need to know the terms of Brexit and be in a position to make an assessment of the pros and cons before making that choice. And it also means that they need to understand the implications and opportunities of independence, whether on the economy, currency, Europe, or the many other matters that people have questions about. Those of us who advocate independence have a responsibility to consider a range of issues in light of the changed circumstances brought about by Brexit, circumstances we did not choose to be in, and then present that information in a clear way. That is exactly what we will do, and we will do so in good time to allow scrutiny and debate well in advance of a referendum that is at the earliest 18 months away. And by doing so, we will allow people to make a genuinely informed choice between being taken down a hard Brexit path or becoming an independent country able to chart our own course. And that will be in stark contrast to the EU referendum. Not only was there no detail and no answers before that vote, that remains the case, shamefully so, 9 months after that vote. Presiding Officer, let me seek to end on a note of consensus. We might differ on the best way forward, but I suspect that almost all of us across the parties can agree that we would rather not be in this situation. The majority of us wish that the UK as a whole had chosen to remain in the EU. We wish that the UK government was pursuing continued single market membership. But we cannot avoid or ignore the consequences of the UK-wide vote or of the UK government's response to it. My determination at all times since the 23rd of June has been to stand up for Scotland's interests, and the support of this Parliament has been welcome. But 9 months on, there is no indication at all that this Parliament's voice has carried any weight at Westminster. Instead, the UK government is taking decisions entirely unilaterally that I and many others believe will deeply damage our economy, our society and our standing in the world. Whether we like it or not, Scotland again faces a fundamental decision about what sort of country we want to be. The question before this chamber is simple. Who gets to make that decision? The answer to that question cannot be me, and it cannot be the Prime Minister. The decision about what kind of country we are and what path we take can only be made by the people of Scotland. It is for that reason that I ask members to support the motion before us today. I move the motion in my name.